Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. It's Terry, your host, coming to you from the Loves in Belen, New Mexico. And yeah, we got a delivery, live unload, OTIF load, going to Walmart up the street here in Los Lunas. And what time is it? I don't even know what time it is. Oh, it's exactly 11 Mountain Daylight Time. No, Mountain Standard Time. And we got to be up there 14:20 as our delivery time. So try to be up there around 13:21. My trainee is in taking a shower. And yeah, we stopped last night in Moriarty because we weren't running too hard. And I was like, well, why don't we just stop here in Moriarty? Because I felt like if I came over the mountains into the valley here, Albuquerque and this area, that the truck stops might be filled up or places to park might be taken. I do think we probably could have parked down at the Isleta casino, but I was like, yeah, just stop here. And so he did a good job. I mean, it wasn't like super hard, but he was able to back into a parking spot, and there was a truck on one side, not a truck on both sides. And he basically got it the first try. I gave him a couple of pointers. I was outside and gave him just a couple of little pointers, but not anything to write home about. So yeah, I'm pleased with his progress, and maybe later on we'll talk to him and get his thoughts on orientation and all that stuff. So it's February 7th, or as I want to say, the 7th day of Black History Month 2024. And today I want to take you to Massachusetts, both the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, so after the Revolutionary War, after 1789 and the Constitution being ratified, but I also want to talk about stuff that happened before the United States was the United States, and when the Massachusetts was called the Massachusetts Bay Colony. So we'll do this in order. And so there was a guy named Crispus Attucks, and Crispus Attucks is a fairly famous non-white person that was killed in the Boston Massacre on March 5th, 1770. Now I say that he was non-white, and what I'm kind of alluding to is that he probably had and by the way, Crispus Attucks was a mariner. He worked on whaling ships. He was also a stevedore, so kind of like a longshoreman. He basically made his living, around ships and on the water. But he was probably born in Framingham, Massachusetts. So, but he was referred to as a mulatto, which is now a derogatory term. But he was probably had some West African descent, but also a native descent from tribes that were in the Northeast United States. So, but he is generally regarded as certainly the first black person to be killed in the Revolutionary War. But the war wasn't the war in 1770. But it has been reported that he was the first person killed in what we would call the revolution, or the armed uprising, or basically fighting back against British soldiers. Although there was another younger man, a teenager, that was killed in an incident before that. But the Boston Massacre occurred when there was basically a business dispute if you will, between a British officer and somebody that was providing, like, I don't know, tailoring services or something. And that kind of spilled out onto the street because British officer was like, whatever, you know, I'm not even going to pay attention to you. But then there was soldiers nearby and they got involved, and then kind of like citizens, colonists started rallying around their fellow citizens. And next thing you know, you got a bunch of British soldiers with guns, and you have you know, colonists just ready to fight. And some of the colonists showed up with, you know, sticks and you know, tools and stuff like that. And it's reported that Crispus Attucks was the person who was basically was like ready to fight the British and the British soldiers. And he hit somebody with a club or a stick, and next thing you know, the British are shooting into this group of civilians, and Attucks was the first person to really get hit, and he died from 2 bullet wounds to the chest. He was buried along with the other men that were killed in the Boston Massacre. They were all buried in at the Granary burial ground, and this is a picture of their gravestone. And they were buried in they were all buried together. So it wasn't like, oh, this guy's not white, and so he has to go to a different cemetery. He was, you know, and I should say also that there were questions about his, how it was that he had his freedom, but it's most likely that he never was enslaved. He was just, you know, this dude that lived, you know, was from Massachusetts. But anyway, he was buried with all the other people, and here's a picture of his gravestone. Now, I'm guessing you've probably heard of Crispus Attucks because there is a lot of stuff that is named after him. There are schools all over the country. I mean, just like all sorts of disparate places like Kansas, Texas, all over the place named after him. He has been named in poems, in hip hop music, in, you know, lots of different songs and stuff like that over the years. And I learned about him when I was a kid. But in case you haven't heard of Crispus Attucks, now you have. So the second Massachusetts connection, so that we were talking about the Boston Massacre, the second Massachusetts connection that I want to talk about to Black History Month is in the Civil War. As you know, Lincoln, you know, signed the Emancipation Proclamation. It went into effect on January 1st, 1863. And because of that, there were abolitionists who wanted to start arming black men and having them fight for the Union. And there were people that wanted to do that. So one of the regiments that was formed was the 54th Massachusetts. Now, if you've ever seen the movie Glory, and I don't know why you wouldn't have seen it because it has a great cast in it. Morgan Freeman's in it. My man, Forrest Whitaker's in it. My man Denzel Washington's in it. And as the colonel of the regiment, Colonel Robert Gould Shaw, Matthew Broderick plays the role of Shaw. And I would show you a picture of Shaw, except Matthew Broderick basically and Shaw, they probably are related, okay? But anyway, Gould Shaw was a Union infantry officer. He had wounded at the Battle of Antietam in September of 1862. He comes back to Massachusetts to recuperate, and the governor of Massachusetts, who was an abolitionist, picks Gould Shaw to be the regimental commander. And Shaw's family his father was a noted abolitionist in Massachusetts, and so it was kind of political, but he had combat experience. He had experience on a battlefield. So the 54th Massachusetts is formed, but they recruit from states outside of Massachusetts, and they eventually get to a number of about 600. They get on the road, you know, in 1863, and they go down to the Carolinas, and so the Atlantic coast, they're in Georgia, and South Carolina and stuff, and in so they are, and I don't know exactly what army they were attached to. I didn't really dig that deep when I was kind of referencing this, but the movie Glory, which is a great movie, by the way, it pretty accurately portrays what happened to them. And so they are involved in the sacking of some towns in Georgia, which Robert Gould Shaw really didn't like, and that's portrayed in the movie, where he's like, why are we burning these people's houses down, type of thing, right? And like his boss, like some brigadier general's like, well, they're secessionists and we got to stamp out secesh, right? And obviously later on, when Sherman marches to the sea from Atlanta to Savannah, he burns down a lot of plantation mansions and stuff like that, and tears up stuff. But anyway, Gould Shaw doesn't really like that, and his soldiers are just basically doing like menial labor, and they want to prove themselves. And this was important because there was this racist, thinking or racist rumor that colored troops, and I use that term because that's what they were called, colored troops wouldn't fight. And so it was important to, it's kind of like, throughout history there have been things said about African Americans or people of color that were basically unproved allegations, rumors about what they could and couldn't do. And a lot of times segregation was used to not allow them to prove what they could do. So this was an important regiment because it mattered to the Union war effort, but it would also create the narrative about the African American soldiers, about the colored troops. And so then shortly after they're involved in this kind of like stuff they didn't really want to be involved in, they are asked to help on a battle in James Island, South Carolina, which is a barrier island near Charleston. And they get into the fight, and they actually bail out a white regiment, the 10th Connecticut. And this happens on July 16th, 1863. So you're talking like, what was that, 13 days after Gettysburg, the Battle of Gettysburg ended, 12 days after Vicksburg has fallen. They want to get control of the barrier islands and forts that guard Charleston Harbor. Fort Sumter was one of them, and that's kind of where the war started. But July 16th, 1863, the 54th Massachusetts comes into the fight and reinforces the 10th Connecticut, who was getting overwhelmed by the Confederates. And the 54th Massachusetts stops the Confederate attack, allows an orderly withdrawal of the 10th Connecticut, and keeps these guys from being either overrun or taken prisoner. And a journalist who was with the 10th Connecticut, or at least at that battle, said, and this is a quote, "Probably 1,000 homes from Windham to Fairfield," so those are two towns in Connecticut where the 10th Connecticut Regiment drew troops from. So probably 1,000 homes from Windham to Fairfield have in letters been told the story of how the dark-skinned heroes fought the good fight and covered with their own brave hearts the retreat of brothers, sons, and fathers of Connecticut. So this was a journalist providing the evidence to support the narrative that colored troops, that African American troops would get in the military and also fight, and they were skilled and could win, and they weren't going to shrink under the weight of combat. So a couple days later, even though those troops had marched a ways and they were tired out and they had been in this engagement on James Island, the Union forces are preparing for an assault on Fort Wagner, and this is the culminating scenes of the movie Glory. But what happens is, on July 18th, 1863, the 54th Massachusetts leads the assault on Fort Wagner. And Fort Wagner was a redoubt that was certainly well fortified, well armed, and it was a very defensible position. The 54th Massachusetts attacks and fights bravely and competently, but they suffer very, very heavy casualties. They suffer about 42% casualties. And here's a picture of, an artist's rendering of the battle. In the attack, Robert Gould Shaw is mortally wounded. Hundreds of his troops are killed, and the attack ultimately is not successful from a military standpoint. That burden does not fall, though, on the 54th, because the 54th acquitted itself very well and took heavy casualties, but did their duty that day. And, they proved that Negro troops, as people would also call them, were able to do the job of being soldiers, and that was very important. And shortly after this battle, even though the regiment was badly decimated in this attack on Fort Wagner, shortly after this battle, Ulysses S. Grant wrote to Abraham Lincoln and said that he heartily supported the incorporation of Negro troops into the Union Army, and he thought that it could, he didn't use the term game changer, but he basically thought that it would be a huge benefit to the Union war effort to defeat the Confederacy. It was, and it wasn't until 1948, though, that the armed forces of the United States were desegregated. That happened during Harry Truman's administration. So all the way through the Civil War, and even before it, right? Like there were African Americans that fought for the United States, but all the way through until after World War II, we still had segregation in the military. Black troops led by white officers, but it basically defeated a narrative that racists had about African Americans and the military. And then in that battle too, there were several, individual acts of extraordinary heroism, and I want to focus on just one. There was a sergeant, a black man. His name is William H. Carney, and I'll show you his picture because he's a handsome devil. And Sergeant Carney, and this is a picture taken well after the war, because around 1900 he was finally recognized with, and what you see pinned to his lapel there is the Medal of Honor. And because they didn't do the neck thing, they didn't have the, I don't know what you call it, necklace holder. I know there's probably another term for it. But anyway, Carney, during that battle, he's fighting, and he realizes that their color bearer has been, so the guy carrying the regimental flag or the U.S. flag has been struck and is wounded. And it was a huge deal back in those days to keep your colors upright and not have your colors captured by the enemy. And so he said he dropped his rifle, which, nowadays we'd be like, no, don't do that. But he dropped his rifle and he became the color bearer. and kept, moving forward, rallying his troops, because troops would rally on those flags. They were like, that's my regiment, that's our flag, those are our colors, that's where I need to be. Because in the melee of combat, people would get separated from their units. And so he was recognized for his efforts, because the color bearer, in addition to not being really armed, they typically wouldn't take a defensive position. They were in the front. They were exposed to the most fire. And it took a lot of guts for anybody to be like, I'm gonna go rushing towards all these other people that are entrenched with rifled muskets, and I'm unarmed. And there was no body armor back then or anything. So a lot of color bearers got killed or badly wounded. And so it wasn't, it was him basically saying he was willing to sacrifice his life if necessary to carry those colors. So, and he was recognized for it. So, yeah, so a little bit of Black History Month stuff, and I'll be back in just a second, and we're gonna talk about some other stuff. Okay, so I'm back with you. This is my trainee and PSD trainee, and I'm gonna let him introduce himself, and then.
Yeah, hey, I'm Logan. Nice to meet everybody.
So this is Logan. He is new to Prime. So, what's a little bit of your background? How'd you get to? How is it that why are you here, basically?
Okay, so it's kind of hard to explain, but in December I was laid off from my job. I was a cost analyst, and I'd always really enjoyed traveling. I used to be in a band, so.
A band?
Yeah.
You were with the band?
I was with a band, yeah, not the band.
A band.
And I really liked traveling across the country, and I actually wanted to be a pilot at one point, even just for the travel.
Commercial?
Yeah.
Commercial airliner.
Yeah, commercial airliner, just for the travel experience and stuff. So when I got laid off, I was looking around for jobs and looking around for opportunities. And I was like, why don't I want to, try to be a truck driver? And it was just literally at the very beginning of January, I started looking around for companies and how to get into trucking and stuff like that. I even went and interviewed at a trucking school, but they wanted you to either pay up front or they were going to finance it and stuff like that.
How much was that? Do you remember?
It was, I think it was about the same as what Prime charges you back. It's about $5,000.
Oh, that's cheap for a trucking school, from what I've heard.
Yeah, I want to say I remember the figure $7,000 was floated around.
Okay.
And that may have been what you have to pay back when you financed it if you quit or something like that. And I can't remember why that was $7,000, but it was between $5,000 and $7,000 that they wanted to charge. So I heard that there were trucking companies that would actually pay you to get your CDL. They would pay you while you're doing training and stuff like that. So I looked into a couple of those. My sister has a buddy who's in trucking, and he had mentioned Prime and said Prime is kind of the way to go right now. So I looked up Prime, and there was another one, Rowell. Is that how you say that one? Roll, yeah.
Out of Wisconsin?
Yeah, so Roll actually, I live in South Carolina. Roll actually had a training place in, I think, Conyers, Georgia or something like that. So it was only 2 hours away from my house.
Down by Atlanta?
Yeah, so I was looking between them and Prime, and really Prime, I think, paid more during training. And seemed to have
Prime pays more during training. Let's just get that out there.
Sure.
All right.
But they also had a longer training period, and I knew I didn't have any experience.
Prime had a longer, or rail?
Prime.
Okay.
Prime
I said roll, but it's rail.
Is it rail?
Yeah, it's rail. I don't even know why I said that.
Well, it's ROE.
Yeah, but it is rail.
Yeah.
Rail.
But anyway, so yeah, Prime had longer training, and I knew that I would want that because I didn't, the idea of driving a big truck to anybody is kind of daunting, and I had driven a box truck before, a big Penske truck for my last job.
Okay.
But
so you were used to being up high on the road and stuff. Okay, cool.
Yeah, but handling the trailer and stuff is something that I knew I wanted to get more extensive practice with, and I was willing to take the extra time in training just to feel more comfortable once I actually got hired and was was out on my own. So I I contacted Prime maybe like the second week of January. They got back to me pretty quickly with a recruiter and kind of walked me through the process. I had to go get my CDP locally. I had to go, they send over this 120-page document, like study guide. And
wait, Prime did, or
yeah, Prime.
Oh, okay.
Prime
okay,
sent
wow.
over. Prime sent over a 120-page study guide, and they said like, oh, you only have to study, chapters like 2, 5, 6, and 8, which was still like half. So it's
a
still
lot
like
of stuff. Still
70 pages of information about like air brakes and how everything works on the truck and stuff like that, and how you're, So it was a long. I studied a whole weekend for it, and then the next time I was able, I think either Monday or Tuesday, I went and took my test.
Do you take them all at the same time?
Yeah. You take them all at the same time, and you can take them one at a like you can fail part of it, and they'll give you like a retry of it.
Sure.
But it's like 3 parts. I think it's like general, driving a truck. It's air brake system, and then the third one I think is tanker.
Well, there's combination vehicle.
Yeah.
So like, and then tanker is usually separate. But
yeah.
It's been a while since I took it.
But I don't think we had to do anything about combination vehicles. I think what we studied was part of like the general.
Okay.
Like there was maybe like 2 questions about it, and about how like what's more likely to roll, and then it gives you all these scenarios. A combination 45, or a 7. Like it gives you all these. So there wasn't too much to that.
It didn't say was there a choice hauling ass down a mountain in Pennsylvania and just not using the Jake brake? Was that a choice?
There were some really funny, like obvious questions. It was like,
Yeah, I do remember that when I took it.
It was like, what's the proper thing to do? Contact your supervisor or ignore the problem and just keep going. It was like, what should I do?
And that question is still there because people still get that question wrong. They're like, ignore it.
Yeah.
And you those people who miss that question, you'll see on the road.
Yeah.
Because they'll have like flat tires that are smoking, and they'll just be like driving down the road.
Yeah.
So so you come to Prime.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just curious, from the time that you like contacted Prime
mm-hmm.
till the time that you came to Springfield for orientation, how long was that?
It was only 3 weeks, and that was that was honestly part of the appeal too. Is like it seemed like you could get in pretty quick.
Okay.
Because I wasn't really, I hadn't saved up money to be unemployed for more than like 2 months maybe. So I had to basically find something pretty quick.
So you just got like laid off in December?
Yeah, the end of December, and by the
Merry Christmas, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I actually got my Christmas bonus, so that was great. I got my Christmas bonus.
Really? You did get a Christmas bonus?
Yeah.
That is better than a lot of companies would have done.
Yeah. So yeah, it was 3 weeks, and then I'm up here by February, the beginning of February. Really, I think like the end of January I was up here.
Okay, so you go and you drove to Springfield. I know that.
Yes, but they do offer you Greyhound tickets. Like they'll either offer you a Greyhound ticket, or if you find a cheaper plane ticket, they'll fly you.
Oh, okay.
But when you take your own vehicle, they pay you 15 cents per mile. So I got like a $118 check the other day for it, which was kind of nice. I decided to drive my own car, even though I was coming all the way from South Carolina, for a few reasons. One, I've got family in Lexington, so I went through Lexington to visit them for a few days.
Lexington, Kentucky?
Lexington, Kentucky.
Okay.
So I'd also read that just from a few Reddit posts and stuff like that people had suggested bringing your own vehicle, so that when you're back at the terminal, if you want to go out and see a movie, or if you want to go somewhere, you don't have to sit there and rely on the shuttle or the Uber and stuff like that. And I will say that has been pretty nice to just be able to shoot over to Walmart, or go get some fast food or something like that on my break from training and stuff. So
okay, so you come and orientation, what's that like?
So the first thing you do is you just go in the first day and you do a bunch of paperwork. I'm trying to remember because it was a week ago, but you do a lot of paperwork. They give you a lot of classes on kind of like what to expect when you're coming into prime. They even start out, like one of the first things we learned was like, here's how we feed you. They had the chef come in and talk about how you get your free meals and give out your meal cards and stuff like that, which is another cool thing about Prime, that they give you basically $8 for their diner at the hotel to eat for free, basically breakfast, lunch, and dinner all week.
It's kind of I mean, I don't know. You weren't in the military, were you?
No.
But it's kind of like boot camp, right? Like you
Yes.
like you just take care of people's needs. I always see the people at Springfield, especially at Springfield, because you see them walking a lot more.
Yeah.
And they got their little pouches,
Yep.
and they got their brand new clean safety vests, and I'm like, those are the recruits.
Yep.
I mean, I feel like they should be going to lunch in formation.
Yeah.
They should be, there should be a drill instructor with them.
Yeah.
But
and it's I will say this, it's not like people around, I felt like very well treated, like even the like lunch staff and the diner staff, like they would know what card you had, like so they would know like kind of when you came in. And I heard him tell this guy like, oh, good luck, welcome to Springfield and blah blah blah. So everybody around has been super nice, like the teachers, the trainers, even down to the people like that work in the hotel and stuff like that. So I had a really good positive experience with it, and very welcoming experience so far.
Oh, cool.
Except my trainer, my PSD trainer, he's, I've had a little problems with him, but
yeah, that's because I am the drill instructor.
yeah.
I mean, look, a lot of people when they first get to Prime, they're like, I didn't realize that the PSD instructors were going to drop us for 20 when we fucked up. But
well, luckily I haven't fucked up, so
yeah.
I've done everything perfectly.
I ain't messing around here. This is life and death.
Yeah.
So you got through orientation. We met on Friday, so today's Wednesday. We met on Friday.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and I've shared with you, I think, that you're only my third PSD student.
Okay.
So, I do things differently than maybe, like there are people that just PSD train, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're pad trainers. And I don't know if they're trying to do away with that, or I don't know what the status of that is. But so I kind of had, look at things a little bit different. But what are you seeing that, is there anything that surprises you about, like, since you got with me, is there anything that surprises you?
Yeah, so you called me, the way it kind of works is like, until you get an actual trainer, this is something that I didn't really understand or know going in. They put you in kind of like a general class where they just like, go over a bunch of stuff with you, and maybe they might take you out on the training pad. I'm not really sure, I wasn't there long enough, but they might take you out on the training pad with somebody just to like, as a group, to show them stuff.
Like Dave.
Yeah. Yeah. But
so Dave is one of the instructors who instructs instructors, but he also works with the students.
Yeah. So I got called out to you pretty quick, and then from there, you're just pretty much at the mercy and whim of like whatever your PSD trainer is doing, what they've got planned.
Mercy and whim.
Yeah. They didn't like, the website doesn't really explain it that well. They just say, oh, you have 2 to 3 weeks of PSD training, but they don't really explain what that is.
Right.
And so like, they're like, oh, you'll be paired with a trainer, but they don't, it's like my recruiter told me this, but I didn't know if I should believe her or the website or what. But she was like, oh no, you'll be out on the road pretty much once you get it with your PSD trainer. And I had thought like, oh, you were just going to be doing a bunch of training like at the facility. And so I'd been telling people like, oh, I'll be in Missouri for 2 to 3 weeks, and then I'll go on the road. So that was a little bit surprising, but I'm thankful. Like, I would rather be out on the road earlier, like getting the on the road experience earlier than just sitting around a pad for 2 weeks.
So it happens both ways. Like it's kind of weird. Neither answer is wrong. Okay. Because there are some trainers that you would just be in Springfield, and they're training multiple PSD students at a time.
Okay.
And so what they'll do is they might go out overnight with one student, and then you would just be hanging in that kind of big group.
Yeah.
On the days that you're not one-on-one with your trainer.
Yeah, now that you mention that, I think my roommate at the hotel was like that. Because he would go out, for like a few days and then come back, and his trainer would be gone, so he would just work with other people on the pad.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the other kind of PSD is where you get paired up with somebody that basically just runs over the road all the time, and then they just take you out and you run, like we're in New Mexico.
Yeah.
So we've driven across Kansas and the Panhandle, Oklahoma, Panhandle of Texas. Now we're in New Mexico. So, okay. So if there was one thing that you would tell somebody that's coming to Prime that you didn't know, or you found out by accident, I guess, is there any advice?
Just be attentive, like listen really well to what people are telling you, and be what's the word I'm looking for? Be patient, and just kind of like go with the flow and try to be respectful of everything that's going on and everybody that's helping you, because they're putting a lot of time and energy and money into your training. And to me, that was like the most important thing coming in. It's like, I look at this as a huge opportunity for me personally, and just come in with like an open mind and be ready to learn.
Okay, cool. Well, so I mean, I try to make sure everybody, like when we're on the same truck, we are on the same sheet of music. So yeah, I think what we're probably looking at is we're going to deliver this load and then head east. I told my wife I'd take her on a date on Valentine's Day, so I'm going to stop at the house, and then once I've stopped at the house, then we're just probably going to head back to Springfield, spend a day or two till we're both comfortable that you're ready to roll, and get you scheduled for your CDL exam, the practical exam.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, so we'll circle back and maybe do a follow-up, when as we hit some milestones.
Okay.
Any final thoughts?
No.
All right. That's a wrap then. All right. Thank you to Logan, and thanks for watching. Bye.